So all of these balls and these bowls are all made with just one tool, the Arbortech SpheroPlane. You can set it so that it does a convex shape like a sphere, or you can set it so that it makes a concave shape like a bowl. Today what I'm going to show you is how to make a bowl using the SpheroPlane. So I'm going to make a shallow bowl, something like this one. You want to have a piece of wood that's fairly flat and maybe even thickness. I've drawn a few concentric circles just to give me a bit of an idea where I'm going as I'm carving the bowl. I like to start with a very shallow, setting the SpheroPlane so that the cutter is just protruding maybe a millimetre. You don't need very much. You can see it starts to create a radius. The deeper the cutter is relative to the guard, the deeper the curve that it'll make. You can actually set it quite deep and do a small, steep one, but it's much easier if you start with it shallow, and you'll see why in a moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go around in a small circle from the center and expand outwards. The idea is that I should cut down until the guard is contacting the wood. And then you try to keep the guard in contact with the wood, particularly towards the center, and it'll start to form the curve. If I just keep it level like this, I can plane across, and that's not what I want to do. You can do other shapes, but this time I want to do a nice dish. So I have to spiral out from the center and follow the natural curve that is produced by this guard. You can see the trick here is to just move around in a circle, always pushing the guard down into the bottom, and it starts to form a dish. If you're always running it down into the center. And it pays to keep coming back over the center, and you see it starts to get very smooth. Now this first cut is the most difficult part of the whole exercise. So just getting that nice little dish is the beginning. Now what I'll do is I'll get it nice and smooth, and then I'll start to take from the outside. So it won't cut anymore in the middle, but if I go into the edge, I can start to expand that ring and bring it out further and further. Having these concentric circles, it helps guide me just to make sure I'm staying in the center. So now you can see I'm getting a nice smooth bowl shape. If I come from the inside to the outside, you'll get a nice circle. If I come from the outside, I can break that circle, but then it will expand and go deeper. Also, at this stage, I can also get an idea of what sort of curve that I'm getting. I'll just keep expanding that same curve and move it deeper and deeper into it, and then I may change the actual shape as I get closer to the bottom of the bowl. So as you can see, I'm now getting a nice bowl shape. It's fairly smooth. The more often I go over the center, the smoother it'll get. It's not important that I get it very smooth at this stage, but as I get closer to the final shape, I'll take more and more time to deliberately just smooth it over and get that absolutely perfect curve. At this stage, I start to check for depth. At the moment, the depth is 35 millimeters. So I've still got a long way to go. I just want to make sure that I don't go beyond, say, 60 millimeters in depth. probably deep enough now. It's very nice and smooth, straight off the tool. You can see the finish. There's very little ridges or anything, but I'll now put a sanding disc on it, fairly aggressive sander, and then I'll just sand that smooth. When I put the sanding disc on, it's at a different level relative to the cutting disc. Now I want to mimic this curve, so I now turn the guard down until it touches the wood. And if I want to get a perfect copy of that curve, I'll back it off so that it's not cutting, so it's not sanding at all. So it should be just resting on the guard, like this. If I start it up now, and I should slow it down now because it's a sanding disc, so I'll put it on about 3 or 4. Now I'll start it running and I'll rotate this until it just contacts the wood, and then it will give me a perfect curve and take off any of these little tool marks, etc. Okay, to do the other side of the bowl, what I'm going to do is superimpose another spherical shape like the ball, but a much flatter sphere to do the outside edge. And the way to do that is fairly similar. With the inside, I said to set the cutter up just external of the guard. This time you want to set the cutter up internally so that it wants to form an internal sphere. Once again, I would do it fairly flat. So it's not far off flat, so I'll bring it up to closer to the edge. Alright, so it's just inside, so it's actually now riding on the guard, and I would say it's maybe 2 millimeters up inside it. When I put it on the flat and I run it, it won't cut at all. But as I put it over onto the edge, it should start, you can see the cutter's now in contact with the edge, it'll cut. But if I always come from the top, it'll form a curve. That curve is dictated by the position of the cutter relative to that guard. I'll start with that, and then I'll decide whether, if I want it steeper, if I want to get a steeper curve, I'll actually make the cutter go further inside or the guard come out further. It seems counterintuitive actually, but that's how it works. So won't cut at all on the flat, and then I'll move over and see what sort of angle I get as I go around the edge. So I won't know the angle until I've done the cut. Important thing to notice now is the angle of this bevel that I've created. That's been dictated by the position of this blade. If I was to go over the edge, there's a point where if I start to lean it over, it cuts, and that angle just happens to form that particular angle. So if I now have a look at the inside of my bowl and the angle of that bevel, I can now get an idea of what the angle of the bowl would be at the edge, and to make sure that it's steeper than the angle on the inside. If it was equal to or less, then you'd come through the center. You really want to have it a little bit steeper so that it comes in somewhere here, and this radius meets this one. So really it's just a matter of looking at that angle, and that's actually pretty good. I'm just imagining maybe it could be a bit flatter. I'll just see as I go. It's important to understand just how this tool works. It always wants to cut a sphere. So it's forming a large sphere, and wherever the sphere intersects with a plane will form a circle. So you can tell how you're going because it always will, on a flat surface, produce a circle. As you're going, I've marked out the circle of the base here. I can focus on one side and bring it closer or more to one side or the other as I go in, so that it's nice and central when I get to the bottom. But it'll always produce a circle, just a question of where that circle is as it gets smaller. So you get your angle by coming from the top, and that'll form a circle. If you want to make the circle smaller, you need to take away from the outside edge here, and then that'll shrink the circle, and then away you go. But the angle is dictated by that. If I want it steeper, I want this guard to come out further, and it will go steeper. Close now, but I can see that this curve does not meet this one at the right angle. It's a bit too shallow. So I'm going to now adjust it so that I can do a steeper curve. Now doing the steeper curve is kind of counterintuitive because I actually make the guard come out further, and that'll allow me to go around the edge and create a new angle. Also, I'll do it in very small increments so that I'll get a nice gradual curve down to the other edge. This cutter is also a planing cutter. All you do is put it on a flat surface and bring it down until it's just touching the surface, and then it'll cut flat. Once again, I want to adjust this with the sanding disc now so that it still follows exactly that radius. To do that, I put the sanding disc on the bowl, and then I'll just wind the guard down until it just touches. When the guard just touches, then it will mimic that curve. But to be doubly sure, I go a little bit beyond it so that it's not cutting at all. If I start it, it'll suck onto the wood, and then I'll just adjust it until it just starts cutting, and that will give me a beautiful profile, exactly the radius there, and it'll smooth out any tool marks there. A deeper bowl, you simply just make the cutter further and further out so that you get more and more of a concave shape. If you have a look at this bowl, it's shallower than this one, but they're from the same wood. So if I put the cutter on that and I make the cutter go in a little bit deeper, I would start from the center and move out, and I can make it deeper and deeper to my preference. So you'll find that just a small adjustment makes a very big difference on the angles that you get. So you'll have to play around with it a little bit until you get familiar with it. But there's a bit of a learning curve, I admit. But the secret is always just to keep the guard flush on the wood, and your angles are then dictated by the position of the cutter. So I'd be really interested to see what other people do with it. I'm making lots and lots of balls and bowls. I hope you have as much fun as I've had with it. So get a SpheroPlane and have a ball.